now we are official. Once again, if you haven't already, put your name in the chat so we can get Flex and Gator going. I'm going to share my screen. All right, so welcome everyone. This is Accessibility Basics. I am Maggie Gover. I teach in the English department. This is winter 2021. And actually, I'm going to get out of this really quickly because the thing I want to really start with is knowing what it is you all want to know. Do you have questions? Are there terms you've heard that you don't understand? Is there something that you've heard but you think that doesn't sound right? You want some clarification? Let me know what it is. What are you burning to know so I can make sure that we cover as much as we can of it right now.
I would
No? Go ahead.
I would just say that, and this may date me in terms of my age and when I went to grad school and everything, but about a year ago, people were, or I started hearing things about accessible documents a year or two ago as we talked about online teaching, and I just was like, I didn't really understand the term, like what is not accessible and why wouldn't something be accessible. And I have had a preview of your presentation for today, and I'm like, this is just the breakdown I needed.
Okay.
And I guess Tanya is sharing a similar sentiment.
All right, so I don't know what I don't know. That is so true, right? You come up against something and you're, oh, that's what I didn't know. Okay. How to start off with creating a document that is accessible instead of going back and fixing things that weren't born accessible. Yes. We will go over that today. So hopefully this will be useful. Any other things that people particularly want to know or have particular questions about?
Well, I would just add, I think Adobe DC especially is an amazing tool, and there's a lot of cool functionality that we can use, especially when we are in a remote environment. And I'm hoping that kind of without that being the primary purpose, it reminds everyone in the division how we can start to use it as a tool, not just with our students, but with each other to communicate and do things. So I hope that'll be kind of like a happy side effect.
Perfect. All right. Oh. Okay, excellent.
I also
We're
heard
gonna
a
move
couple
back
of rings. If other people have just coming in, please remember to put your name in the chat.
Also, I will be trying to monitor the chat as we go, but if I am looking at the screen and don't notice the chat, please feel free to just interrupt me. With all of this, I think it's really important to ask questions as we go, because if you have a question about something and it's not answered right away, we may move on to other things that build on that question, and now you might be a little bit lost, right? So please feel free to ask questions as we go. I welcome that. How am I captioning?
Yes, my question too.
That'll be on a slide, yes. This is, it's just a built-in feature of PowerPoint, actually. So that is how I'm doing live captioning. So the first question I want to talk about is, what do we mean by accessibility? And there are all sorts of accessibility that we need to be mindful of. These are the ones that are what we think of as persistent accessibility most of the time. So that's visual accessibility. So this might affect someone who is blind or has low vision. Auditory accessibility, this is someone who's hard of hearing or deaf. Motor or mobility flexibility, so these are people who have low mobility or perhaps have something like hand tremors due to Parkinson's or something like that. Cognitive abilities such as dyslexia may also be, it affects someone's accessibility, right? And photosensitivity. So most of the time we think of photosensitivity with people who have epilepsy or seizure activity, right? The photosensitivity. However, photosensitivity can also be uh, inherent in some migraine problems and things like that. So these are just the kinds of accessibility things that we think of as persistent accessibility challenges that an individual might be dealing with for a long term. However, and this is especially important when we're in this crazy COVID remote environment, there are also accessibility issues that can arise for individuals, and these might be incidental accessibility issues. So for example, for many of us who aren't used to staring at screens for like 30 hours a day, right? Seriously, more than 24 hours a day, I'm just staring at a screen. Um, eye strain from overuse might be a thing, right? Or environmental accessibility issues. So perhaps usually I'm in a classroom and I can focus and hear what the teacher's saying, but right now I'm in my home and I have 9 siblings and it's loud and I can't even hear what the teacher's saying, right? So right now we might be dealing with lots of accessibility issues that are arising for individuals that aren't part of their own persistent life, right? Mobility, the other types of accessibility issues can also be, arise for individuals. So for example, if someone breaks a leg, they might have trouble getting to class, right? And that's a mobility issue. However, these are more prevalent, I would say, in this environment that we're in right now. So accessibility in terms of equity and inclusion, the goal of equity and inclusion in education is to mitigate barriers to higher education for all different kinds of people with varying abilities and backgrounds, okay? So there are a variety of ways to mitigate those barriers for people with accessibility issues. One is through accommodations. So accommodations are basically modifications that an instructor can make to a course or maybe an assessment system so that differently abled students can participate and can do so effectively. Another way of doing this is through universal design. So originally this was an architecture term, and the idea the idea of universal design is a series of principles of building actual buildings with multiple abilities in mind. So for example, putting elevators into buildings helps all sorts of people, not only those in wheelchairs, but also those who are low mobility or those who are pushing a stroller. All sorts of people can be benefited from having an elevator in the building and not just stairs, right? So that's a principle of universal design. So the idea is that those with different abilities don't have to request accommodation. Their accommodations are already built into the system. It mitigates not only the accessibility issue that a person might be facing, but it also mitigates the barrier of having to request accommodation and the psychological stress of having to do so possibly over and over and over again. So in education, we're concerned with a student who has to constantly ask to be accommodated, starting to feel like maybe they don't actually belong, right? Maybe this isn't for them. So universal design can help mitigate that barrier for them. And as you will see, California community colleges are basically asking us to operate under the principle of universal design in our digital interface with students. So I think this is one of the important things to know, is that they're asking us to build a whole course as if we are thinking about each individual and differently abled people rather than just creating accommodations for individuals as we go. Of course, we might have to do both, right? But the idea is building from the outset in a way that fewer individual accommodations have to be made. So this is a very popular cartoon that I think we probably are familiar with, but I think it really demonstrates the idea of universal design well. So there's this person who is shoveling the steps, and the person in the wheelchair says, "Can you please shovel the ramp?" And he says, "All these kids are waiting to get in, so I'm shoveling the steps first," right? And he says, if you shovel the ramp, we can all get in, right? So it's removing barriers for all students, not just for that one student who needs it, right? So building a course so that different people with different needs and abilities can access it without the request for accommodation. All right, so let's talk about some examples. So this is a physical classroom example. So let's say I'm teaching on campus and I have a very strict attendance policy and tardy policy, 3 tardies equals an absence, that kind of thing. I have a student who has low mobility, who is often coming coming from another class on campus and will be late often, probably every time she comes to class, right? The accommodation solution is that the student requests accommodation and I modify my tardy policy for that student. So it stands for the other students, and that student, I know you'll be late to class. That's okay. I'm not going to mark you late, right? Okay. The universal design solution is that I'm going to build my class differently. It's not a fix, it's a build, right? So instead, I'm going to start the class with a low stakes writing assignment that can be submitted at any time, or maybe doesn't even need to be submitted. Maybe it's some journaling. And then I don't take attendance until after that low stakes assignment, maybe 10 or 15 minutes into class, so that several minutes into class, that's when I'm taking attendance. Now, I don't have to worry about giving accommodation to one student. I've built the class differently. All right. So in the digital classroom example, which I believe is what we're most all dealing with right now, is that if you're teaching online and you've got lots of documents on Canvas for students to read, I have a student who maybe has low vision and uses a screen reader to access reading on the screen. The accommodation solution is that I will find digital texts for this student. For each of the texts, I will find a digital version that is readable by a screen reader, and I'll provide them to that student. The universal design solution is that all the documents on my Canvas page are already readable by a screen reader. So that's the solution that we're being asked to kind of work with in our digital classroom environment. Any questions up to this point? Okay. All right. So mostly I think what we're talking about is this second piece, right? Which is the digital classroom environment. So that's what I want to transition to now, especially thinking mostly about documents, but also the way, Canvas works and that kind of thing. So accessibility in the digital classroom. Okay, so there are basically 7 big areas that I think are the big things that we're talking about when we're thinking about accessibility in the classroom environment, especially digitally, right? So it's headings and tags, alt text, lists, descriptive links, table headers, colors, sizes, and fonts, and captions.
I have a question.
Yes.
The big 7, are you saying kind of like these are the big 7? Can you sort of finish that title? Like, is it, these are the big 7 things we need to sort of check or make sure are accessible? Is that what you mean by that?
Yeah, so these are the big 7 accessibility considerations.
Okay.
So these are all digital accessibility considerations. So they're all the things that we would be thinking about when we're building websites. For our purposes, this would be probably our Canvas page, when we're creating documents, when we are finding materials that we're going to assign in our classes. These are the 7 things we should be thinking about. Yes, you can. I think these slides are going to be posted and this is being recorded. So I think you will have access to all of this.
Yeah, I'll put it on the community of practice, both the 101 community of practice pages, 101, 101 plus. And I think I'll just send it out, a link to the recording to the division next week.
Excellent. All right, so what is this?
Can I just jump into that? We're going to do more training about the DE evaluation rubric for her folks teaching fully online, the new DE evaluation rubric. It talks about 508 compliance, and those are the areas that align with the big 7 that Maggie's talking about, which are in order to truly be in compliance with accessibility in terms of evaluation, we're asked to make sure that we are being really attuned to these areas. So we'll do some more professional development around this. And the DE team, I think, will also be doing more. But that's also, that's kind of like 508 is, I believe, the section in the ed code that this is connected, the big 7 are connected to.
The other thing before I forget, Maggie, is maybe you could just also send me the PowerPoint again as an attachment, and I could attach that to when I send out the recording.
Absolutely. Happy to. All right. What do you think this document might be?
Could that be our syllabus, like a class syllabus?
Yeah, this is my syllabus. This is the first page of my syllabus. And how did you know that?
Probably because I just finished mine. I don't know. It just visually looked familiar. So
yeah, it looks like a syllabus, right? It has the appropriate headings. It has maybe some ats in there. It doesn't have any words. I replaced all the words with A, B, C, D, E, and I replaced all the numbers with X, 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 and still you were able to see this and recognize it as the first page of a syllabus. A lot of that is because of just the way it's formatted, right? You're familiar with the formatting. It looks like a syllabus. It has some headings in the appropriate places. It has, you know, breaks in the appropriate places. It looks like the first page of a syllabus. So there's a lot of information we got from the syllabus without reading any words. And that's the first thing we do, right? When we look at a reading, and that's the first thing we ask our students to do when they look at a reading, is to deduce what they think it might be about. What do you know about this before you even start reading, right? Now, I have created this with the appropriate tags and whatnot, so a screen reader should be able to read this syllabus appropriately. Without the appropriate tags, this is what that page looks like to a screen reader. So if I were to hand my student a syllabus that looked like this, I think the student would probably be a little bit confused, right? There's a lot of information packed very closely together with no headers and no signposts to guide me to what I should be reading. So I wanted to, if it's okay, I would love to, let me read this question and answer it. I have found myself shying away from using images on my syllabus. Do you have thoughts on that from an accessibility point of view? I think images anywhere are fine as long as you are creating alt text, and we'll talk about how to do that. If they're important for your syllabus, I think they're great to use. In fact, I use them whenever I'm showing students where they're going to go on Canvas. This is what you click on, that kind of thing. I think it's very useful. You have to include alt text for those images. And I think this is a very good video. I combed the web for newer videos. This is from 2013, but I like this one best because it really helps me understand what someone with a screen reader is actually doing. Note that screen readers aren't just reading aloud. Sometimes they're translating into Braille. Okay, so I wanted to share this video with you if YouTube will let me. It's 7 minutes long, so it's a little bit lengthy, but I think it's worth it.
Work for the Trace Research and Development Center here in Madison, and one of my jobs is to look at all applications, web browsers, word processors, etc., to see how well they work with screen readers. A screen reader is a piece of software that allows the user to either fire a speech synthesizer or touch via a braille display the information on the screen. The screen screen reader will follow along and say exactly what I'm doing. Synthesizer test. That's the one we want.
Most synthesizers are able to speak with a variety of speech rates and a variety of vocal pitches. Many speak with different voices, and some even speak in different.
See if we, I'm going to see if we can make it full screen on YouTube.
Some even speak in different languages.
I can ask the screen reader to tell me various things about what I'm reading. For example, if I'm on a title, I press Insert F, it's going to tell me some information about the text.
Character formatting, Times New Roman, 16 point, bolded, style, heading 1, line spacing, single, paragraph formatting, aligned left, level 1.
So that's a whole bunch of text. But what I discern from that is it's a title, it's a certain style level in Word, and I know that it's a font size bigger than what I've been dealing with. But I only did that because I sort of thought I was on a title. The point is, it takes an awful long time for a screen reader user to get a layout even of a simple page. One of the things I can't do is use the mouse. I can move it along a mouse pad, and I have no clue where the mouse pointer on the screen is. What screen readers have done to help get around this is to allow the user to use the number pad keys to actually move the mouse pointer. And the screen reader gives me an ability to read by sentence by doing alt down arrow.
This is the eloquent speech synthesizer.
Or I can read by word,
Pitches peer many, speak with,
or by letter.
space, W-I-T-H, space.
Once again, I'm only using the keystrokes that you could use in Word. I am only reading a word at a time. If I were able to see the screen, I would know that there were a couple titles on the screen that are in bold letters, and they're centered, and they're in larger text. I can't see that. So the problem a blind user has is that one begins to read not knowing anything about the layout of the page. The only way you know what's on the page is when you get to it. Greg Vanderheiden, our director, has often referred to it as the soda straw approach. You're looking through this small hole. You're reading one word at a time, and that's all you see. And that's all I hear until I get to the next word. I have no clue.
We could regroup and watch it on our own and come back in a few minutes.
Hang on a
Ask
second.
the reader to tell me various things about that made no sense to me whatsoever. To about what I assumed the middle of the page was. And then what was on the middle of the page said, read the text below and use these instructions to fill out the top part of the page.
Sorry, I can't figure out what browser that was. Okay. Let me share the correct browser instead. All right.
Well, geez, you know, if I'd seen, I would have gone right there. But what I assumed the middle of the page was, and then what was on the middle of the page said, read the text below and use these instructions to fill out the top part of the page. Well, geez, you know, if I'd seen, I would have gone right there. But my problem as a screen reader user is I can't. Another application that is used a lot by people who use screen readers is the World Wide Web. And let's say I wanted to go to the trace page. I type it in and hit enter.
Has 40 links. Trace Research and Development Center, Graphic Trace Center, College of Engineering, University of Wisconsin-Madison.
And what you heard it say is it told me how many links were on the page. It told me the title of the page. Now that's a graphic because if the graphics had been on in the browser, there would have been a picture there of that text. And because graphics are off, we use the alt text, which tells me what the graphic would have been. One of the things the screen reader allows me to do is to bring up a list of links so I can really basically get an overview of just the links on the page. So if I do insert F7,
Links list dialog. Links list view. Frequently asked questions and
so I can arrow down now, and I know that everything I get to is a link.
what's new at the Trace Center. Help using this site. List information and archives.
Screen readers allow me to basically have access to the printed page, which I've had before, but it's mostly been in the form of people reading books to me on tape. There's a lot less time taken now for me to do things. There's a lot less work involved. There's a lot less dependence on others for reading stuff to me. I have done this often enough that I get used to reading pretty rapidly. So one of the things I can do is actually speed up the way in which the screen reader reads. And the
53,
higher the numbers go, the faster it goes.
64, 75, 86, 97, 120.
This is about the speed at which I read. So if I then tap back the OK button, and then we read the document. You understood that, right?
All right. Just a moment. Let me get out of that. Okay. All right. Okay, so I understand that the sound was a little choppy, but the things that I think are really important there are to hear him talk about how he's accessing the documents, right? And so he doesn't see what's on the page, so he doesn't know that the directions for following what you're supposed to be doing on the top of the page are in the middle or on the bottom. And I think the analogy of reading through a straw is super useful, right? If I can only see what I'm seeing right now through this straw, then I'm not getting the holistic sense of what is happening on the page. A screen reader can just read through all the headers, right, on a page, and that helps the reader orient themselves into what is this and what should I be taking away from this. So the first accessibility consideration we're thinking about are the headings and tags. So headings and tags tell a screen reader what type of structure the page has, right? So just like when we showed the syllabus, it didn't have words on it, but you knew what it was. If I had asked you to identify one of the headings, you could have put your finger on it, right? You knew what the headings were. It allows the reader to skip from heading to heading when they need to look to find something. And it also helps them find the specific item. As you heard him say, you can go by line, you can go by, sentence or word or even letters, right? So it helps, especially if someone's trying to quote or something like that, it will help them get to where they're wanting to get to in the text. So before we, used styles to create headings, a lot of times we would use just things like bold, make the font bigger, right? And that's one of the things that he showed in that clip, is that it can read to him that this is a bold text and that this is 16-point font and everything else has been 12-point font. But he would have to really already think that it's a header and then ask the computer to tell him the formatting information, right? So using the kind of formatting to make your headers isn't as accessible. That it's more accessible when you're using the appropriate tags and the appropriate styles, because the screen reader can see those, right? So along with headings and tags, the reading order should be set to be appropriate for the document, so that it starts with where a sighted person would also be reading and reads through the document. You don't want to be skipping around. And for text or for slides like this, they would have to make sure that all of the text is available in the outline view. And this corresponds to the CVC OEI rubric areas D1, D8, and D9. So If you've done this with all of your documents, then you are completing those rubric areas. So I wanted to show you, I think this is the thing that I get the most questions about from those who are just, starting on their accessibility journey. So I'm going to show you what it looks like in each of the different platforms that we're talking about. So this is Microsoft Word. And as you can see, of course, I could make the title bigger, or I could use the title style, right? Title style is what will tag it for a screen reader as the title. And then you have a heading, heading 2, heading 3, heading 4, heading 5. The trick is if you just keep clicking on headings, it will keep making more heading styles for you. So just keep going. So you might only see 2 headings at the beginning. If you need more, once you've used heading number 2, heading number 3 will appear.
Where did you, because of course, I just do it by font and font size normally. Where did you go? Where are you going in Microsoft Word?
So in the home ribbon,
Yep.
this button is called Styles.
Okay.
Now you are not locked in to this formatting for the sighted person. You can also change the style so that the title is green and bold, right? Or the headings are black instead of blue, right? So you can change the styles as long as you're tagging them in the styles. You can also change them. You can also change the whole style of the whole document in something called themes that we'll touch on later. So if you want to do a holistic, everything about it's changed, you can do that elsewhere. But here, let's say this is all good for you. You just want the title to be bold, right? You can do that here. Just change it to be bold and it will retain its tag as a title. Okay, this is where you do it in Google Docs. As you see here, Google Docs gives you the option for a subtitle and then headings, and of course your title. It's in your ribbon. It says normal text and you just change it to whatever type of text you want it to be. This is tagging in Adobe Acrobat DC. It's a little bit more complicated, but this is when you already have a document that you are then creating tags for, right? So as you can see, I have the structure type highlighted here, and the header I have as heading 1. You'll notice that at Adobe Acrobat DC, there's no title. Heading 1 is the title, right? So some of it, the different features and the different platforms are going to be a little bit different. So you just have to kind of click around and figure out what is going to be the most understandable, right? Here we have titles, here we don't. Okay. And then the other one is in Canvas. So again, instead of making it bold or italics or something like that, when you come over to the paragraph style, paragraph would be here, header would be here. Notice that there is no title here and there's no header 1, right? It's just goes straight into header 2. And that's because what is in this box up here is the title. So that's going to be tagged as the title of the page. And then it will start with header 2 after that. Any questions about tagging and headers in any of these platforms or in general?
I think you just answered this question, but what you're saying is, as long as I start off with like making my header 2, I can still adjust the font and the style? Or
Correct.
Is that just true? I can. Okay.
Yep.
In all these platforms.
In all of these platforms, yes.
Okay. It's just a matter of setting it up that way for the screen reader to identify it.
Correct.
Maggie, I guess the question I have, when you were talking about in Word, how you can change the style, but identify it as a specific tag.
Mm-hmm.
So for example, what if I wanted my document to have all the titles or header 1s be bold and blue? Is that a legitimate thing to do? Or is that like, no, you never do blue because blue is not accessible?
So it's a little bit tricky because there are built-in themes, which are like your colors and your sizes and what font you're using and that kind of thing. There are built-in themes to Microsoft Word and to PowerPoint.
Mhm.
So the reason those built-in themes are there is because they're already like pre-approved, as it were, for
Okay.
accessibility. There are other things that we're going to talk about, like color contrast, right? Like the contrast between small text and for small text against its background is 7:1. The color has to be 7:1, right?
Mhm.
Contrast ratio. And so if you're doing your own colors, you risk changing that, right? And
Okay.
coming up with a contact ratio that contrast ratio that is not accessible. And if you're using a built-in theme, then it already is accessible, or it
Okay.
should be.
So you're not saying that when we can change the styles, it's we can change it to what we like. It's changing with what already the options are in Microsoft Word.
Well, you can change it to whatever
Okay.
you like, right? It's just then it might not pass all the accessibility checkers when you upload it to Canvas.
Right.
However, most of the time, if you're gonna, change the title, you want the title to be bold, right?
Yeah.
That's probably gonna be okay, right? It's
Mhm.
still gonna be tagged, and if it was the same color and it's bold, that's fine. If you're changing it from a blue to a black, then that's gonna be fine. Probably the contrast ratio will be fine. So some
Mhm.
of it is what is visually appealing to you, and what do you want your class or your document to look like.
Mhm.
um, and that's okay, as long as it's also still accessible, right?
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And after, I was thinking we could get through all of the explanation stuff, and then I'm happy to stay after and to show people. I'll open up Word and we can, create a document, and we can talk about, how would I do this, or if you want to see how you could change the style, the title style to be something different, I can show you how to do that.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Okay.
I think there
Okay.
might be
So
something in the chat.
yes, so Aisha says, using the PowerPoint and Word heading templates was challenging. I know we want to be visually appealing, but we lose some of that accessibility when you create your own layout. That's true. Well, you can create your own layout in master slides. So you can create a slide master that would have all the tagging appropriately. And then that is how you would have to create a new slide layout would be in the master slides. Also, PowerPoint and Word have accessibility checkers that can help. They aren't terribly descriptive when you are figuring it out, but very helpful. The newer versions of Word and PowerPoint that we have access to via GCC. Yes, so that's an important thing, is that you want to have the latest Word, because I was working on Word from 2013, which did not have the latest changes to accessibility requirements, right? So the newest ones have all of this embedded in them, and you don't have to worry about it, which is sometimes easier. Of course, you can do all the accessibility checking yourself and modifying documents and whatnot, but it's easier if it's already built in. Sarah, did you have a question?
Oh, yeah, I was going to say, so, and also just to summarize, if you are working on your course in Canvas, one of the things that we want to aim for is extreme consistency in how we're using headers, right? So that's also, we aren't meant to jump around. So once you've established, like let's say you're working, I think I'm saying this correctly, is that what I'm going to do after this too is go back and look at how I'm using headings in one assignment that's early on, and make sure that I've then applied that same strategy for all of my assignments, and I'm using them in the same way, because consistency is really important for students and in terms of how things get tagged. Is that a good thing to be thinking about too?
Yes, in fact, the more sensitive of the accessibility checkers will tag and say the headings are out of order, right? Like you started with heading 4, right? And that's actually a mistake that I used to make a lot, because I'd be like, "Ooh, heading 2 is too big. I don't like it. I don't want it that big. So I'll use heading 4." Well, that's confusing to a screen reader, right? It's looking for what's the next thing that I'm supposed to be reading, right? So definitely going in the order of the headers and making sure you're consistently using them on all of the pages that you're creating is very useful. The latest version of Word is the one that is the cloud version, the Office 365 that you have to log in through your GCC account and then download. So that's the newest version. And the good thing about that is that they're constantly updating it. So when changes come, they will update it. The bad thing about it is it's a yearly subscription now, and I mean, luckily we have access to it through GCC, but otherwise you have to keep licensing it. The license for the downloaded 365 version is 2019. Yes, so if you get just the download version where you have access to it one time to download onto one computer, the latest is 2019. All right, shall we move on? Other questions? Okay, Sarah, you still have your hand up. Do you have another question?
Is that okay? I just have a question about the Microsoft Word. Is that going to be, I'm just trying to think if that's going to mess up my other documents. If I start using Microsoft Word 2019, I'm still going to be able to access the stuff I created in earlier versions, right?
Yes, I have the latest version of Word and I can access things that I created in 2005.
Okay, great.
Yeah. Although also do all your backing up and everything to the cloud before you do anything.
Right.
All right. Alt text. Alt text is alternative text. It's descriptive text that describes for a blind person or a low-sighted person an image that you have on whatever document you have it, right? The screen reader will read the alternative text where the image would be. If you have if you have images that are just decorative, like for example, this PowerPoint is called WISP and it has these wispy things over here. I don't know what they are, reeds maybe. These are decorative, so they don't need to be read to a screen reader. So they are tagged as background. There's also a tag that would be just decorative, right? So if you tag it as decorative, a screen reader will just ignore it. It's not important for the reader to know. Also, when you're embedding images into documents, the wrapping of the image should be in line with text so that it's read at the appropriate place. So this corresponds to the CVC OEI rubric area D7. So when you're going through your alt text, creating alt text for all of your images, this is the rubric area you're conforming to. So here are alt text dialog boxes from the various platforms that we're talking about. This is in Canvas. You, as you embed an image, you would put the alt text here, or you would indicate that it's simply decorative. This is Microsoft Office, and this is where I would put it and mark it as decorative, either way. This is Adobe Acrobat. So this is within the tagging and the page structure in Adobe Acrobat, you would create your alternative text. And this is in Google Docs. Google Docs is interesting because it also gives you a title, which would really be something like a caption. So they're all similar. Lists. So lists are great. And we are asked to use the built-in list features because the built-in list features will tell screen readers what information belongs to which list and the type of list that they are presenting. So for example, a bulleted list is different than a numbered list, right? A list that has to be read in order is different from a bulleted list where the items can be in any order. So sometimes people try to use numbers and icons. So, creating like a bear paw for your list instead of like, clicking the bullet point, and tabbing things and spacing things so that it looks like a list. That's not going to tell the screen reader that it is a list, right? So instead, you want to use those built-in list features and the increase and decrease indent tools. Of course, this also corresponds to a rubric area D2. Okay, so list tools. So here we have Google Docs. Google Docs, you have your numerical list and this is all in order, right? You can pick any of these. You have your bullet pointed list. They have multiple options for that. This is the decrease indent or the increase indent. In Microsoft Word, you have a variety of list options. These are the numbered lists, and these would be the bullet pointed lists here, and your decrease and increase indents. Canvas, for some unknown reason, put something between the list and the increase decrease indent, which makes no sense, but there you have it. So we have the list features are on the right hand side. So this is the bullet pointed list and this is the numbered list, and the decrease and increase indent are over here next to your subscript and superscript. I don't know, it makes no sense to me. Every place else does the lists first and then the increase decrease indent directly next to it. I will also say that when you are converting Word documents to PDF, Adobe Acrobat does not give you an easy way to tag lists. So theoretically, they are automatically picked up if the document itself was tagged correctly in the first place. So if you make it on Microsoft Word and then convert it to PDF and select the optimize for web view, it should pick it up and should auto tag it. But there's no good way to tag your lists once they are in PDF format. So just a caution, a word of caution on lists. All right, any questions? We've done alt text and we've done lists now. Any questions about those?
I have one which sort of relates to what you were just saying in terms of, you know, if we know we're going to be moving to PDF, is Google Docs versus Microsoft Word, is any preferable in terms of, you know, what's easier, you know, what's going to be read more easily, I guess, by Adobe Acrobat, or are they pretty much the same?
I don't actually have any idea, really. I mostly use Microsoft Word because that's what I'm most comfortable with, and I think it gives me the options that I want, whereas Google Docs is a little bit more of a stripped down word processing platform. I use Google Docs a lot when I'm doing collaborative work, but for my own work, and especially when I'm creating documents to put on Canvas for my class, I generally bump them over from Microsoft Word. But I haven't actually done a good analysis of, you know, does this Google Doc translate better to PDF than this Microsoft Word document does? That would be interesting to do.
And I guess actually, I mean, there may be a lot of situations where it doesn't have to be converted to PDF, right? Do you leave a lot of the documents you put up for your students in Microsoft Word?
I do. I do. Yeah. Actually, this last time around for my winter class right now, I converted everything in my syllabus into a syllabus module so that every single item on my syllabus is on a page in Canvas, which is very accessible, right? It's all built in for them. So that actually is what I was happiest with most recently, because even on the syllabus page that Canvas provides, it's a 13-page document and you're scrolling and scrolling and scrolling, and students are used to being able to like hyperlink to what they want to see and it's right there. And so that's how I did it this time around, and it seems to be a hit with my students so far.
Is that shared on Canvas Common, or can you, or
it's my syllabus.
Yeah.
But it's my syllabus.
I'm just trying. I'm like, how can we steal that? How
do we do that? What are the steps to doing that?
I seriously just copied and pasted everything into Pages.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm happy to show you after.
Okay.
I'm making my list.
And we can do any, like, I'll actually show you how to do things on Microsoft Word, or I can show you how I did something in Canvas. I'm happy to do some of that demonstration after we get through, like, the definitions, if you will.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, descriptive links. Descriptive links tell the reader what the link is. Descriptive links are specific enough to provide context, but they are short. So sometimes I see like an entire sentence as the, you know, hyperlink. It shouldn't be an entire sentence. It should be just a couple of words or a phrase that tells the reader what they would be going to if they clicked on it. So rather than copying and pasting a link into the text where you see the www and that kind of stuff, use the insert link tool. So phrases like click here or link are not descriptive enough. It should tell the reader what they're going to get to when they click on that link. And of course, this also corresponds to an OEI rubric area, which is D3. Okay.
Maggie, can you give a quick example of what that means in terms of the distinction?
Sure.
Not like click here, but like click, but in a few words, because we're English teachers, so we get wordy.
Yeah.
Yeah. So this is a screenshot from my actual syllabus, actually, that is about requesting needed technology, right? And you can see my link here is fill out a request form. And so when a student is clicking on that, they know they're going to be sent to a place where they are filling out a request form, right? So it's not the whole thing that's linked. It's not click here to go to fill out a request form. It is, this is how you would do it.
Is that, Maggie, is that the request form to the library's device request?
It is.
Excellent. I was like, that looks familiar.
Ah, that's
Yay.
nice.
Laura, can I answer a question for you?
I just had a quick question. So I had previously learned that we should try to share links in two different ways. One, embedding, like you had said, but descriptive. So instead of saying this form, say, for example, the request form or the event request form or whatever, but then to also include the actual link, the whole hyperlink into the document. So is this kind of discouraged now?
Okay, so there are, as with everything, right? Like no one will be like, oh, everyone agrees that this is the best way to teach, right? So as with everything, there are different schools of thought and different philosophies. So one school of thought is if the link doesn't work and it's invisible to the reader, then they don't know where they're going, right? And so it's better to have both so that you can copy and paste as well, right? However, to someone with a screen reader, that screen reader is going to read that entire long hyperlink, which might be really long, and it's not going to say, by the way, this is a link in case the descriptive link doesn't work, right? It's just going to start reading it and be very confusing to the person who's accessing it that way. So there are two schools of thought on that. One is that for those of us who are sighted and we can see it, and if the link isn't working, this is a good way for us to get the link. There's another school of thought that says, but that's not accessible to a person with a screen reader and it makes it more difficult for them. Okay, Sarah is saying our GCCDE team is on team. Links are identified with meaningful and unique text in place of displaying the URL. So
Okay.
I actually had an issue. I don't know, this may be a tangent. I had an issue with, I don't know what the correct term is for a non-disabled student, but students who just were not that savvy about doing stuff online, not understanding the red text should be clicked on. So I started saying, click here, colon, so I don't know. It really threw me. I don't know if anybody else had that issue, but.
Yeah, so I actually did this semester, I created a video about how I have organized Canvas and how they can access Canvas for my course.
Nice.
And so that might be a quick thing to train students on, right? That when you see this red link or when you see this red, it means click here, right? You need to click on it to go there.
Yeah.
But that's a very interesting thing to note. Yeah, certainly. And that is differently abled, right? Someone
Yeah, I
who's
guess that's
not
right.
tech savvy, that's just
Yeah.
differently abled. And we're
Yeah.
trying to make it reasonable for everyone to be able to access. Absolutely. So behind the scenes, this little arrow, does everyone know what this little arrow means right here next to the link?
Takes you outside of it or takes you?
Yes, so that arrow will tell the screen reader links to an external website. So it's telling them it's going to link them elsewhere. And sometimes if you can put that in parentheses next to it, right? Fill out this request form, external website. They'll understand, oh, this is a click, I can click here and go someplace. So how do we do this? How do we accomplish this? It's through these insert hyperlink dialog boxes. So here we have the Canvas one. Here we have the Microsoft Word one. Microsoft Word, you can link to the document or the email address or manage a file as well. The Google Docs one is interesting because it will pre-populate some ideas for you. So I was like, common prepositional phrases, and they're like, how about these websites? You want to link here? Which is interesting. Usually I have my own thing to link, but thank you very much, Google. And Adobe Acrobat DC is cool because it gives you so many options. Like you can create boxes or you can create colors and all kinds of stuff. So you can link very intricately with Adobe Acrobat. I'm sorry, I'm just reading the text now. Okay. So this is an interesting issue too, that a lot of our students access Canvas through their phones, and how is it looking for them and what shows up for them is very different. And I found this when I was a student taking a Canvas course last semester, that a lot of times there were, you know, videos on the course site about, you know, oh, to get to the rubric, you click here and here, and I'm on my iPad and that doesn't work for me, right? It's not working there. So when you give instructions, it's also very helpful to tell the students, you know, on a desktop computer, this is how it's going to work. It might work differently on your phone. Yeah. Okay. Other questions about hyperlink boxes? Okay. Table headers. So headers should be designated in tables. In most programs, unfortunately, they are not automatically designated. So data cells should be associated with the appropriate column and row if there is a row header as well. And captions should be used for your more complex tables. Any chart that you are providing, just like an image, any chart needs to have alternative text with textual descriptions that also says things like, you know, this is a trend we see, the output is increasing as the demand is decreasing, something like that, right? Of course, this also corresponds to some OEI rubric areas. So this one's a little bit more complex when you're adding in charts and tables. So in Adobe Acrobat, we have, it will automatically find that this is a table, right? And it will highlight this as a table. And when you're doing your tagging, or if it's already been done, you have to go in and make sure that you tell it this red box is what I'm highlighting right now, right? And that red box is a header cell. And I would, if I were actually doing this, I would change the ID from R1C2 percentage to assessment, right? I would change it to what that is. In Microsoft Word, it's a little bit tricky because it doesn't say, is this a header, right? To designate it as a header, you have to go to the row and then click this box that says repeat as header row at the top of each page. So even if it's a tiny little box that's going to be in the middle of the page and you're not going to be going multiple pages, you have to click that to make sure that the program knows that that is the header cell. Canvas is a little bit complicated too. So first you insert the table, and here you have the inserted table. Once you have inserted the table, you go to the table properties. It won't be visible to you before you have a table inserted. It will only have the inserting the table in there at first. When you go back up to the properties or the cell properties, you will be able to designate your header cells. Okay, now I have a bunch of chats to read. Okay. All right. All right. Okay, I think we're good to go. Does anyone have questions about tables? The tables are a little tricky, but I think the big takeaway with tables is just anytime you have a table, make sure that you've designated what are the header cells. Questions? We're mostly English people. We don't have a lot of tables. Is that what we're saying?
I have a question about tables, but it's connected to creating buttons. So I will maybe ask you at a different point. I don't know if you're familiar with buttons, but if you create buttons for your class, which I've done, you have to do it within a table if you bring in the buttons that you've created. And I'm not sure how to tag them using with the tables and everything. So I'll ask you offline.
Okay, cool. Okay, colors, sizes, fonts, all that good stuff. Okay, so colors should provide sufficient contrast. What is sufficient contrast? Well, in the latest rendition of ADA compliance, color contrast is 7:1 for regular sized text and 4.5:1 for large print. So your headers and whatnot can be 4.5:1, so they can be a little bit lighter. And the regular text, your text on your syllabus and that kind of thing needs to be 7:1. So black against a white background is always going to work. Color should not be the only indicator of significance. So if you have a document where some of the text is red to highlight this is what you should be paying attention to, there should be something else indicating that as well for those folks who have color blindness or have other sight accessibility issues. Whenever possible, one of the styles that you can use is emphasis. And so whenever possible, it's useful to use emphasis as opposed to bold when your bolding is to emphasize something, right? That helps. And you can change the emphasis as well, right? Just like you can change the size of your header, you can also change the emphasis. Sans serif fonts are generally preferable over serif fonts, and text should be no smaller than 12 point. We want all our written text to be large enough for people to see. And built-in themes, as we were talking about earlier, and I will show you now, built-in themes provide all the contrast and the font size, everything that needs to be cleared in order for it to be accessible. If they're built-in themes, it's all going to align to that. So it just eliminates the need for you to be doing a bunch of checkers if you've used the built-in themes. This, of course, corresponds to OEI rubric areas, and the rubric areas are D5 and 6. So if you've done all of these things, you should be good to go. I usually just insert the video in the comment box as I grade student papers. Unfortunately, it's not user-friendly feature on Canvas yet. Is it possible to make annotated comments accessible, or do students need to request audio comments? Okay, so if you are doing the comment feature, like a markup feature on Word or in Google Docs, those are accessible to screen readers. So they will be able to read them. Actually, similarly, the Adobe PDF Acrobat will also read any comments in a screen reader. Yeah, so that's absolutely accessible.
So Maggie, what about in Canvas, if your students are submitting a paper and you're using like the built-in functions where you're like, I don't know, the bubbles or comments or things like that, is that accessible? Or
That's a good question. I don't actually know. I would assume so because Canvas is trying to be very accessible.
right.
I know that the audio comments and the video comments are not accessible. So
Okay. So it
it's
might be a
possible
Katie
to-
question or
Mhm.
okay.
Yeah, that is. I know that if you comment in the box when you're returning something, there's a comment box
Mm-hmm.
as opposed to writing on the actual paper. The comment box is accessible. That will be read
Right.
by a
Right.
screen reader. But
Okay.
on the paper, I don't know about. That's a good
Okay.
question. Okay.
What about on Canvas, the rubric, when you create a rubric?
I believe that is accessible. I believe that is because it's a pre-built by Canvas. So I believe that is already tagged and everything, and it will be accessible to the student. But it's interesting because I don't have a screen reader, so I don't actually know what it would sound like to that screen reader. So that would be an interesting experiment. Again, I assume it is because Canvas is concerned with accessibility and it's been approved for use. And that's one of the things that California community colleges looked at when they were looking at, which platform are we going to go with for all the community colleges. was the accessibility features. So I think that probably the rubric is already accessible.
I'm sorry if you already answered this
Mhm.
question, but I think I think this was Gabe's question. If we make it annotated comments directly onto Canvas, they're accessible?
I don't know about that.
Oh, okay.
That is a question we need to tech to someone who knows Canvas better.
Okay. All right.
Okay, so these are built-in themes. In Microsoft Office, it's in the Design tab. You would go to the theme, and the theme that I showed you earlier, where I had the title and the header and the next header and the next header and the next header, that was the Office theme. That's the standard. It's when you open up Office and when you open up Word, that's what you're going to be typing into. There are all these other themes that you can choose that have different colors and different fonts and all sorts of things that you can choose. And those are built in, and they know, so you'll know that those are already accessible, right? They have the correct color contrast, they're the same, the right sizes, all that kind of stuff. This is an example from Google Slides. You can choose any of these slides and those should be already accessible. Okay. All right. Questions?
I have a question, which is if I'm not using themes, how do I check contrast? Is there?
That's a good question. Yeah. So there are some contrast checkers online
Okay.
that you can use. And so honestly, if you just Google color contrast checker,
Okay.
there'll be like a ton that come up, and they're all free, and you just like put in what you're using and it will tell you if that's enough.
Great.
Mhm. Okay, captions. Whenever possible, live captions should be used when lecturing or in class. They must be available when requested. However, when they're requested because we have a student who has an accessibility need, usually they will be provided for by DSPS, right? So in-person classes, you may have had someone come in and do captioning for a student, or you may have, right now even, have someone have a caption key that you've put into Zoom, and there's a software that's doing it for them. So that is a possibility, right? That there will be someone who needs them, and they will be provided for by DSPS. All videos within instructional audio, however, should be captioned. So even if you don't know that you have a student who needs the captioning, we're supposed to be captioning everything. So audio without video also needs to have a transcript, and transcript captions for videos should be used rather than auto captions whenever possible. So it's easy to upload something to YouTube and have it caption you on its own, but it's preferable to use a transcript. So where you would type out the transcript and upload it to YouTube as well, and it auto syncs it together. When you're embedding videos into your course sites, autoplay should be off, and flashing content or GIFs should not be used unless instructionally necessary. There's also some rules about how much something can flash, no more than 3 times in a second. And I think after 3 seconds, it has to turn off, right? So all of these things are things to think about if you're embedding things into your websites. Remember, video and audio feedback on Canvas is not accessible for everyone. So it doesn't automatically caption your video feedback, or audio feedback does not have a transcript with it. So if you are using these as parts of your feedback to students, then make sure that those students are able to access them, right? You have to be mindful of anyone who has different needs in your classes. And this actually corresponds to a ton of rubric areas: D12, 13, 14, 15, and 16. That's pretty much the end of it. Okay, so how do we do captions? This is what someone asked, right? So on Microsoft PowerPoint, in this little presenter's corner down here, this button that looks like, text on the bottom of a screen, that is the live captioning button. You just click on that and it goes. You can also set it up so that anytime you're in presenter mode, it is captioning. So you don't have to remember it, it just does it. In Google Docs, you click on captions and it works in Google Docs too. So this is the presenter toolbar in Google Docs, and this is where you would caption, or excuse me, Google Slides. This is Google Slides. And in Canvas, this is where you would upload a subtitle if you are recording yourself directly into Canvas rather than recording yourself and uploading to like YouTube or something. When you record directly into Canvas, you upload your subtitles here. Okay. Questions about captions and captioning tools?
I think I've asked several times, like, is there a particular preferred captioning tool that we have at the college to use? Just to see what that is so I can like recommend that to folks on evaluations or just if people come to me. And there isn't really one. I'm not sure that I don't know about if we're allowed to use Microsoft PowerPoint within our videos to suffice as captioning for Canvas to meet the DE standards. I'd have to look into that one because I don't know if that counts as a full captioning tool or not. I mean, I can't see why not, but I've never heard that one mentioned in the list. So just, I'll follow up to ask about that. And I love the idea of using it for remote or live classes too. But I'm not sure if, because we do have to caption all of our videos. I don't know if we've been given the thumbs up to use PowerPoint captioning if you're doing a video which is using PowerPoint for it within the video. Sorry, that was a little rambling response, but just mentioning that.
Yeah. Well, my trick for captioning is that usually I just play the video back and have the dictation tool on in Microsoft Word, and it types it all out for me. And then I go back and I just make sure that all the words are correct and I fix all the like punctuation and whatnot. And then I just upload that to YouTube. So it's a transcript. So transcripts are usually better because in the live captioning, there will always be some things that don't quite translate well. But
where's the dictation tool on Microsoft Word?
Microsoft Word, in the toolbar, there's a microphone. And if you click on the microphone and you just talk and it types for you.
Okay.
Yeah. All right. Any other questions before we move on?
I guess I'm trying to understand the difference between a transcript and captioning, like in terms of accessibility, because like sometimes I do it on Zoom, sometimes I do it on YouTube. I let YouTube caption it and then I go back in and edit. So I guess, which to me seems faster than the transcript. I mean, I love that idea about using the dictation tool, but I'm trying to understand why a transcript would necessarily, is that because I can give the student a file?
So technically, if you're going in and editing the auto caption tool, you are creating the transcript. So that counts as a transcript edit.
Okay.
Yeah. So when you go in and you edit it and make sure it's correct, that's what we're talking about, right? Is that you have the opportunity to go in and edit it, and therefore it is absolutely accurate, as opposed to the auto caption, which isn't always going to be completely accurate.
Okay, that's helpful. Thanks.
Yeah. Live captioning, though, it's not always going to be completely accurate, but it's live, so there's.
I'm noticing
reading from a script. It's going to be that.
I'm noticing that the one for today, as you're talking, is so much more accurate than what I usually see on YouTube. So I don't know why that is, but it's great.
Probably actually because your computer learns, right? And so my computer, I use the dictation tools a lot on my computer, and Microsoft Word and Microsoft Office. I use these dictation tools a lot. And so therefore it's learned my voice and it's learned my speech patterns.
Oh, that's cool.
So the more you use it, the better it will get. Okay. So moving forward, this is pretty much the end. So we can get to the fun like demonstration stuff after if you like. So this can be really daunting. We talked about 7 different really big areas of things to think about with accessibility. So it can be very overwhelming if you're thinking like, I'm going to be completely accessible in 3 weeks when spring starts, right? So the first thought I have is try to break this into manageable goals, right? Maybe do 1 document 1 day, right? Like think about all that you have to do and break it down into little pieces, the same way we would break up our big research essay into scaffolded parts for our students, right? Break it up and figure out what discrete pieces can you work on. Start with the easiest transitions first, or maybe the tools you use the most, right? So if you're a Microsoft Word user, that's what you use all the time. Maybe start with all the things that you already have in Microsoft Word, right? And really learn those tools. The good thing about these tools is that they really do transfer over. Once you figure out how to use it in Microsoft Word, you'll know how to use it in Google Docs too. You'll figure it out, right? It's pretty translatable knowledge. Don't be afraid to try and learn from trying and maybe not making it perfect the first time, right? Failure is part of our growth. I teach this to students and I don't really like to practice it in my real life, right? But that's part of it, is trying and getting frustrated and thinking this isn't working, and then figuring it out and trying again, and then again and again. And eventually it does work the way you want it to. And when it does, they will change things. So know that it takes time. This is not like a super easy, fast process. Like throw it in here and it comes out the other side and it's accessible, right? So be reasonable with what you're expecting of yourself and your courses. I encourage you to click around and explore within the different softwares. The more you just click, click, click and see what happens, the more you'll understand how it's working. Use resources like the Canvas guides. Canvas has great guides about how to make different things accessible, how to upload transcripts to caption your videos, that kind of thing. But also, if there's something you can't find, Google it. Someone has written something on it, and probably someone has done a YouTube video on how to do it and uploaded it to YouTube. When you actually have a student who is using assistive technology, I really encourage you to ask them how it's working and see if you can get like a demo of what it looks like for them to be reading something, because it's really astonishing sometimes, right? Just like in the classroom when you think something's going to work a certain way and it totally doesn't. Similar with your documents, right? Sometimes I think something's going to work a very specific way. I've set it up a very specific way. I think everything is tagged correctly. And then I'll have someone who's reading it on a screen reader who's like, that didn't work at all, right? So definitely be in communication with those with assistive technology. Get feedback from them about what's not working, what is working, and how you can improve it for their experience going forward. And be aware of moving targets. So the requirements for accessibility, as we were talking about earlier, right? There are different schools of thought. So maybe you're teaching in California community colleges and this is the rubric we've been set forth. And then you move to another state and they have a different theory, right? They go with, you need to have both hyperlink and the descriptive text in there, right? So it is a moving target. And also things change with the ADA, what's acceptable, right? So for example, in 2018, they changed the contrast, right? The amount of contrast needed for the appropriate color schemes changed in 2018. And therefore, when I was using older Word, it didn't have that contrast in it. So be aware that this is a moving target and we're constantly getting new guidelines and people have different schools of thought on this. Okay. Questions? Let's see, I got some stuff in the chats. Oh, interesting. So yeah, one of the things that we're seeing that I see in the chat is that when a student is doing peer editing with other students, if they submit something that's not accessible, then it will be difficult for the peers, right? So definitely that could be difficult because I know that Google Docs and Word all are supposed to be accessible with their comments and everything. But for example, a lot of my students save their essays as PDFs, and I'm not sure they're going in and tagging them, right? So probably those essays would not be accessible to a student in a peer group. So that's a good point. Yeah. Other questions?
I mean, I think what I just ask folks too is that like there's a lot of things that I know that from watching this, and also things I just know that I'm working on this winter for my courses. And it's like, how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. But also, I mean, I really think this was really helpful for thinking through a lot of the key kind of like the first steps to take for making things more accessible. But I'd also encourage us as a division to think about what additional professional development and support we need as a division, because I think each topic, each heading can be like 2 more hours of just like a workshop, like that's really interactive too, where we can keep doing stuff because there's just so much. So please let me know and we should talk. And Laura's here. Hey, Laura. You can tell Lara too. What would be helpful in for additional professional development and time as a division and time for the college to address and to work through some of these topics.
Mhm.
Maggie, can you show us how you use the themes in Microsoft Word?
Sure. Should I stop the recording at this point, or do we want to continue with recording?
Keep recording, I think.
Okay.
I think it's going to be helpful.
Sure. So let me open up Word and get my screen shared.
While she's doing that, Sarah, I'm almost thinking like, I don't know, we can ask people at the next division meeting, but like, whether it's Maggie or somebody else, it might be really useful the way they do with the eLumen office hours. You know, if we could have some regular hands-on help available as people are working towards accessibility. I mean, I'm glad we're doing this follow-up workshop on the 22nd, but I just feel like just some one-on-one help for faculty trying to work through this stuff would be so helpful.
Yeah, the college. There have been many requests by the college or by faculty and division chairs to hire an accessibility specialist.
Yeah.
For the college that would fill that particular kind of role, I think. But I think that's helpful feedback. I'll mention that maybe to the DE team. We're going to talk about the DE evaluation rubric together on Tuesday. But I'll try to think creatively, and if you guys come up with ideas too, like how can we do a little bit in each division meeting too, to make the division meetings more, professional development oriented, especially when we're remote, everybody's in front of their computer. If you guys can kind of work on messing around with headings in a meeting, if we've introduced this as a topic and say, now we've talked about this, so can you, while you're still listening with one here, can you go and do this in one Word document and see how this works, or go into one Canvas assignment and see how you can apply this. I'm happy to try to make our meetings more kind of oriented towards working on these topics too.
I mean, it seems like one obvious place to start, I don't know, maybe not depending on the software, but is just like all of us to have a goal of making our syllabus accessible, which should challenge all the skills we're learning, headings and all, should force us to learn those, that might be a place to start, to just say, even if you can't make everything accessible, that could be.
That's a great idea and a great place to start. Yeah. So let's think about when the best time to do it is, if we could do it in the retreat or another place to kind of launch everybody on that project. Good idea.
So someone had asked to see my syllabus on Canvas. So
Your
here it is.
module. Yeah.
So I have it for them to download too if they'd like. And I also, well, this required a little bit of code, but I actually created just an assignments list as well.
Wow.
So, and then this is a module, so they can also just, where did it go? They can go to the bottom and just next to the next thing, or they can go back to the modules and see the whole syllabus and click on just what they need to get to.
Awesome.
So you have a module for a syllabus, Maggie, and then each page is each section of your syllabus.
Mhm.
That's okay. And then, okay, got it.
And what format is the downloadable? Is that Microsoft Word?
It's a good question. It's a PDF.
Okay.
I couldn't remember because I was debating, do I want to just put it up as Word? But when I think when I put it up as Word in last semester, it messed up the formatting in the upload. It was very strange. It double spaced everything, which was really strange to me. So that's why I did PDF this time around. So,
Okay.
okay, now let's go to Microsoft Word. Okay, so this is the dictation tool. So if I just start talking, it starts typing for me.
Okay.
And so when I play a video and I have the dictation tool on, it will also type my transcript for me.
I'm sorry, where's the microphone? Can you just, oh, there it is. Yeah. That's great.
Yeah.
And that's probably only available in the latest version.
Probably, yeah.
Okay.
It's also available on Google Docs. Let's see if I can open up Google Docs. So in Google Docs, it's called something different. I want to say it is called type to text, voice typing. So this should theoretically work in Google Docs as well. But as I said, in Microsoft Word, I use the tool a lot in Microsoft Word, so it's used to my voice, whereas Google Docs, this is the first time I've ever used it, so it probably won't caption me quite as perfectly. So. Okay. Let's go back to Word. So when you want to change the style, say I am starting my syllabus, this is going to be my syllabus, right? I would pick my title and I would say syllabus for spring 2021. Okay. So there are two ways I can change this. I can just change it like this and change the formatting to be, let's say I want it to be bold. And if you go to styles, you'll see that it retained the title tag. So it's still going to be a title. However, if I want to be just this one to be bold, great. But if I want to change the style completely, I would right click on it and say modify. So every time I type a title in this document, I want it to be bold. And now when I type this title, and I know that I'm going to have a title later that's going to be a reading schedule. It's going to retain that. And you can do that with any of these. So let's say right now all of the headings are blue. I don't want them to be blue. I want my heading number 1 to be green. So now I'm selecting heading number 1 and I'm saying course outline. Now that runs the risk I might have not enough contrast here, right? I don't know. Now I can open up an accessibility checker and I can find out what color I'm using and I can put that in the accessibility checker and check. Or I can just go to custom theme. I can just go to themes and use whatever themes that they already have. So in design, I am in the office theme because that's the default theme that we get to. However, let's say I don't really like the office theme. I want a different theme. So I'm going to go down. Oh, I like main event. It has really nice bold letters and it has some of these kind of more muted tones. So let's try that one instead. And it changes the whole thing to what that theme would be. Now let's say I don't like that theme either. I can change it again. I can say, how about this one? Try that one. And as you see, and if I go back home, as you can see, this is still retained as heading 1. It's still tagged as heading 1. Now let's pretend that I had a document that wasn't already tagged, right? I don't want to retype my entire syllabus. Although my syllabus is tagged. Let me see.
Maggie, I don't see the options on your screen. So when you mouse over styles or
Oh,
the different
no.
themes, yeah, I don't know if other people experience the same thing, but I
Yeah.
get, I mean, I get the idea of what you're saying. Yeah.
And I see
mean,
where you're going.
yes.
Yeah,
mhm.
Reason
okay.
they don't-
So this, what I'm seeing now is the picture that I had embedded in the PowerPoint of all those different styles that you could just click on.
Right.
So yeah,
Yeah.
I wonder if maybe, let me try to share my entire desktop and maybe that will help.
There, yep.
Okay. Can you see it now?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, so there we go. Okay, so then let's go back here and show you the styles, which is what we were looking for. So this is a title style.
Okay.
And this down here that's red right now because I'm in this theme, this is the heading 1 style.
Okay.
And let's say I want to be like really like emphasizing something. This is my, let's call this late work policy. And this is just regular, right? So regular style is called normal in Word. In Canvas, it's called paragraph, right? So this is going to be just my normal text is going to say something like, in general, absolutely no late work will be accepted ever, which is funny because that's absolutely not my policy. But anyways.
So
And I want to highlight this. I want this to be really emphatic. So I can go to strong, subtle emphasis, strong emphasis. I can choose one of those. And instead of just using italics, which wouldn't be read to a screen reader, this will say, you know, emphasis on, no late work will be accepted, that kind of thing.
So the emphasis is what, but you don't actually see the emphasis. Like I don't see the emphasis there. Is that? Oh, it's
italics, yeah.
Oh, okay, right. So if you want something to be italicized, use the styles and theme option.
Right.
And then it will read it as accessible as italics.
Right. You could also do it this way. And so if I wanted it to be bold, I would call it strong. If I wanted it to be emphasis, it would be italics.
So the red that you have for course outline and late work policy, that you can assume is accessible because it comes from one of the themes you've chosen. So you don't have to worry about it.
Correct.
Okay, got it.
So, but for me, I'm like, I don't know that I want my headings as red. That seems weird to me. So I'm going to go and pick a different theme because I just don't like that one. Let's pick feathered.
Okay, so it automatically just does it. So even though it looks really light to your eyes or to our eyes, it's still considered accessible because it is.
Yes, this should be accessible, yeah.
Okay, Okay, so it's not what we see with our human eyes, it's what the computer reads.
Well, it will be, so part of accessibility is what you see with your human eyes for those who have low visibility, right? So that's some of the contrast things are for the low visibility folks who will be reading them with their eyes, but they need a lot of contrast and whatnot.
Okay. This helps a lot, Maggie. This explains a lot.
Yep.
Good.
Cool.
Okay. Is there what else would you like demonstrated?
I just have a question, which
Mhm.
is like when I was sending out the email about these 2 workshops, I was saying you need Adobe Acrobat DC probably for the second workshop, but what I'm hearing, if I've understood, aside from, well, I guess with your syllabus, you had to put it in a PDF. I guess I'm wondering how far can you go in accessibility with just it seems like you can go pretty far with Microsoft Word and Google Docs.
Anything that you are creating can be done in Microsoft Word and Google Docs. Yes, sometimes you'll upload it to Canvas and it will mess with your formatting, but it will be accessible, right? So anything that you're creating on your own, Microsoft Word and Google Docs are going to be fine.
Okay, so it's for when we want to assign only daughter or something, that's when we need Adobe Acrobat AC to make it accessible.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah. I want to show what would happen too. So this is from the college. This is our Learning Center's embedded tutoring program information. And this, as we can see, is not tagged, right? All of this text is just highlighted as normal. So how would we change this to be accessible? Just because it's a document that we've already written doesn't mean it cannot be accessible at this point. You can still go through and tag it, right? So we want this to be the title. We want this probably to be strong. We'll probably want this to be heading 1, right? And now that first part is accessible. And it took us seconds, right?
So
What about
Maggie,
paragraphs? There's nothing that you need to do with the paragraphs if you're leaving it in Microsoft Word. If I were to convert this into PDF, I would need to make sure that the paragraphs were in the correct reading order, which means that this paragraph would be read first, followed by this paragraph, followed by this paragraph. But when I'm keeping it in Microsoft Word, that order will already be tagged correctly.
So Maggie, just to clarify, so like the headings 1, 2, 3, that just basically connotes like emphasis or order of reading? Like what does heading actually mean?
So heading doesn't, that's a good question. It doesn't connote emphasis or reading order, okay? So you could have, when you see a document, let me open a PDF document where we can look at the reading order. English 101 readings, here we go. Okay. This is much more advanced stuff, so don't be scared if you're getting a little confused right now. I'm just showing you reading order. Okay, so here we can see what the actual reading order is. Okay, so this heading, this is our title heading, header 1. It comes 4th on the page because all of this stuff comes before it. And I want that stuff to come before it because it's questions for them to think about while they're reading. So this comes first, a header that says these are questions to think about while you read. Then this is paragraph format because these are the questions that I want them to think about. And then we have the heading. And you can see the order panel over here. Number 1 is up here. Oh yes, so number 1 is up here, right? Number 2 is the pre-reading questions, so that's here. Number 3, these are the following pre-reading questions. Number 4, oh, let me change it to this so we can see. So 1 is the figure, which is the page number. 2 is the pre-reading questions, what to read for, or the heading of that. 3 are the actual reading questions themselves. 4 is the title. 5 is that it's actually co-authored by someone who they like throw in because they forgot to tell us that. And then I have 4 paragraphs that are 6, 7, 8, and 9. However, I can change that if I don't want them to read the pre-reading questions first, or that's not the way visually it's supposed to be, right? And sometimes it gets it wrong. Sometimes when it tags it automatically, it will have paragraphs out of order. So if I needed to change the order of the paragraphs, I would do it just like this. Now I have the questions are being read before the header that says that these are pre-reading questions. That's probably not accessible. That would probably be confusing. So I'm going to move it back.
Oh, so
But
you
yeah.
can just literally drag and drop.
Yes, in Adobe you can.
Okay.
So in Microsoft Word, so this is good because it can show you like what's going on behind the scenes. In Microsoft Word, you don't see that. In Microsoft Word, it just goes through section by section, right? And so it's going to start at the top and go through. What the headings does is actually tell the reader what the formatting would look like to a sighted person. So this is a heading, right? This is another heading. This is a subheading. So that when I'm looking at a page, I can see that there's several headings and there might be different kinds of information in each of those headings. When I'm reading it the first time, I'll probably read it the whole way through. When I'm reading it the second time, I might say, I just need to get to know, are there any restrictions? I'm just looking for the restrictions. Where is that? And I can read through on the screen reader. I can skip to the next heading, next heading, next heading, right? And get to the heading I want.
Got it. That explains a lot.
Yeah. Excellent. Any other questions, or is there anything else I can show you, demonstrate for you?
This has just been so helpful, and thank you for all your patience with our questions, but it really helped to have it slowed down this much for me anyway.
Excellent. Well, I'm glad it was helpful. I would be happy to individually help if you're stuck on something, you don't know what's going wrong with it, or if perhaps it's going right and you just think, why is this so easy, right? I'm happy to help and troubleshoot and whatever. So please feel free to email me or reach out.
Well, and I just want to also remind everyone that we're going to do a follow-up workshop on the 22nd. I think I'm going to bring my syllabus and see how far I can get.
Do we want to do Microsoft Word, or do we want to do PDFs, or do we want to do both?
What do you recommend? I mean, a simple thing, it seems like, is for us to bring our, I don't know if it would be too limiting if we just said, bring your syllabus and we'll work in bring your syllabus and have the latest version of Microsoft Word. Or if it could be, open, that because I know, there are people at different stages of their process with this. So
yeah.
I think
it's up to you. I'm happy to troubleshoot either way. I think if we need kind of instructional time, then it's better for everyone to be doing the same thing. But if it's everyone just doing their own thing and troubleshooting, then I think everyone can just bring whatever they need.
Maggie, do you have some samples that maybe if we wanted to work on this before the 22nd, like with the headers?
Samples. No, I have a document that I distributed before, which was the PDF.
Okay.
How to do this in PDF form on Adobe Acrobat DC. And I'm going to make a guide like that one for Microsoft Word. Is that what you're talking about? Like a guide to doing?
I think so. I like to try and play with it so that I'm ready to go for spring.
Yeah.
Just bring the document to the 22nd and kind of compare. But
yeah,
I'm afraid if I wait till the 22nd and not do anything, I'm going to lose what I just got from you today, which was fantastic.
Oh,
So,
great. Thanks.
um,
Well, I'm glad it was helpful, and maybe I'll try to turn around a Microsoft Word document pretty fast so that you'll have that. But I really highly encourage just clicking around and figuring it out. It's like, you
yeah,
know, learning to walk, right? You just got to fall
Sure.
down a bunch of times and click around and figure out what your balance looks like.
And if you're in the English division and you are looking and you've looked and you see that you don't have Microsoft 365, and you don't have the most updated version and you're not sure how to get it, then I know our IT folks have been a little bit overwhelmed with the PeopleSoft upgrade, but I think they're coming out of that. And you should contact the help desk nicely. You can feel free to copy me and, oh wait, and Maggie, are you going to add information?
You don't need to
on
talk
the-
to anyone. You don't need to talk to anyone.
if you're not sure how to do it.
There's a student site that walks you through it.
Okay. You want to send the information? Because that
And
would
I also have a video that I recorded for my students.
that's great.
So I can send both. Yeah.
Because that's not something that we've gotten any training on for faculty. And I'm definitely not using the most updated version. And that was actually by choice. I was like, I can't learn anything new. But I mean, that was like pre-pandemic, but yeah. That I think that would be another really good step to take to kind of just make sure we have the right technology to be able to play around most effectively. Because if you don't have the microphone tool accessible because you're not in that version or it looks different, then I think it'll make the next session more productive. So if you have the video handy, that's awesome. I bet we can all muddle through it. But if you do get stuck and you need help, I recommend also getting that sorted out too as another goal before the next meeting. So you know how to do it if you're using Word.
I have a subscription to Microsoft, so shouldn't I just be able to update it through my subscription?
Yes. If you
Yeah.
have the subscription, you're working with the most updated form.
Okay.
Yeah.
It doesn't look like yours, so.
Theoretically, it should be, but perhaps you need to delete and re-upload maybe or something like that. I don't know.
Alright.
Yeah.
And that's where if that happens, like our IT folks are really awesome. So if you get stuck, and it's not like now, but it's like, hey, I could really use someone. Can someone help walk me through this? I've tried looking at these things and I can't quite figure it out. Please do feel free to use our resources or at the college for that, I think.
And then it's also so great to know for students, because I have had students that don't have Microsoft Word, and especially in this last year, they're freaking out because they can't open a document I posted. So
I'm finding more and more of that because they're using Pages,
yeah,
and which means I should convert everything to a PDF so that they can open it.
but they can get Office 365 just like we can.
Oh, okay.
And Maggie has a video to show them how to do it, which we can steal.
Feel free to link to my video in your
I would
syllabus
love
page.
to.
I'm happy for you to do so.
Because I'm just learning, like that can make or break some students.
Mhm.
They get hung up on one thing like that, and it's a huge obstacle. So
This is something that I actually did part of my sabbatical project writing a course that was kind of introductory instructional technology for students that was it was the idea of a competency-based education course to actually have this course available for students to come in and take a 1-unit or non-credit class and something like this to kind of get up to speed. But it hasn't gone anywhere, but that was part of my sabbatical project. I could see that it would be helpful to have that. And I was like, we could market it to the high school students like, hey, here's just getting familiar with the types of technology that you might not have known about or that you need to get started. Not a requirement, but
also for students, I have a relative right now thinking about going back to school for the first time in 30 years, and he's all freaked out about the computer, so for returning students, I think it's a big deal.
And we're like one of the more technologically with it divisions, by the way, you guys. Like we're there. Like we're hip.
Yeah.
We got
Well,
cool classes. We're here.
Well, and also, Sarah, in terms of what you were talking about with the DE committee and everything, I do think it's important that we have an accessibility person in each division that's discipline specific, because obviously the needs in math are going to be completely different from the needs in English. And and the needs in biology or oceanography are going to be really different. So I'm a little wary of there being one accessibility person for the whole campus, because of that, I guess.
Yeah, well, I think that would be like that's an actual like a classified employee that would be hired to kind of help facilitate overall. But yes, I think that my money's on the 2 new governance committees being formed, social and emotional learning. I think that would be really helpful for our college to have one. Some colleges already do. And the other would be accessibility and kind of that. I think that would be really helpful to kind of have that rep model, because it's worked so great having Rosemary as our code rep and bringing things back to the division and being able to be that like liaison would be really awesome. So yeah, we'll see if my predictions are correct.
Would we have to have all of this in the next time we go through certification, DE certified or Gator? Do we need to make sure everything's accessible and?
So that's so the DE evaluation rubric, which was approved in mid-semester for folks who were going through the evaluation, that's quite a challenge.
Wow.
It covers a lot of these things that we're talking about today. And I feel really strongly that we want to make sure that we have professional development that's really aimed at, hey, you are a DE instructor, this is the evaluation, just make sure you're aware of it and what you're being asked to do. But then also informally, what we did do at one DE community of practice meeting was just sort of go through it. And I teach online, but I'm not a distance education expert and I'm not an accessibility expert, but I just sort of went through and said, these are kinds of what I think would be really important or what we hope to see. And we will have that discussion again more broadly with the division before spring, because it's absolutely imperative that what people are being evaluated about, but also what we can reasonably expect folks to do if they might not have had the training to do some of these things, because depending on when you took IOTL, some of these things weren't necessarily covered, and depending on how you did your Gator, you might not have had the opportunity to be kind of trained in these areas. Laura, do you have any comments on that too? I was, kind of jumping in your role in professional development.
No additional comments. I think that's a great idea. It's something that we're talking about. I know since Victoria's come into her role too, we've been kind of talking with her a little bit about it. So it's definitely stuff that we can explore.
I didn't have it in my certification last year.
No, neither did I. And when I tried to when I started asking around, like, well, what does that mean to make my documents accessible? How do I do it? There was kind of a lot of, ultimately, I think the answer was, we don't yet have the infrastructure at GCC to get faculty up to speed on this right now. So it's a gap, I think.
Yeah, so I think what we can do though as a division, knowing that we really care, and even without that infrastructure, we want to, especially if we have resources and folks who are really comfortable with sharing their information like Maggie, and we're so thankful you're doing this, that we will try our best to kind of be leaders. And that's also, we offer to share these videos to be shared with the campus at large, because I don't think there's been a video or a presentation that specifically covered the things that were discussed today. So we're leading the way. And I mean, I think that's worth keeping in mind too, is as we go through the evaluation process and the improvement process, it really is, there's only so much you can do, and you keep doing it, especially when you're reverse engineering. But if you're designing a new course from scratch, we should be using this from the ground up. But yeah, I hope that helps. I try reasonable, flexible, but with an eye towards seeing people are working towards doing this in your course. You're not going to just sit down over the weekend and make your course accessible.
I just love to get like my syllabus or my main assignment for January, try and make that accessible, my research paper. Try baby steps right now while I've got the time. So.
All right, well, maybe Maggie.
Thank you so much, Maggie.
Yeah, thank you. Maybe you and I and Sarah can discuss, or unless anybody else has any feedback for the 22nd, if we should start with a document we're creating in Microsoft Word and make it accessible, like a syllabus, or if we should work with a PDF, like a reading, and work on Adobe Acrobat.
I'm game for anything, so. I'm
Okay.
coming. I'll be here.
I really liked your idea of bringing the syllabus, Elizabeth, and just kind of working on it
Yeah.
step by step as we're going through. I know I mentioned that in the chat that a lot of my questions come up when I'm physically going through the work myself. And I'm like, wait a minute, how did we do this again?
All right, well, maybe we'll do this as make it specific to like a syllabus, or at least make it specific to Microsoft Word, and maybe suggest everybody bring their syllabus.
Okay.
Yeah. And I think we'll also ask that if people didn't attend the first workshop, that they watch the video first. Not to say that it's the same, because you can always have additional questions coming up, but really, if we're jumping in and really trying to do like more of a kind of a workshop, this was very helpful taking us through the initial steps, I think. All right. Well,
Well,
everybody
thank you so much. I'm
Thank
stopping the